everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now rated by Disney, or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. It is late for me, but I finished the book, so I have to do a review for it. Today, of course, I am reviewing Shatterpoint by Matthew Stover, the one and only novel to truly focus on Mace Windu. But before I get to that, I have two short stories. The first is Omega Squad Targets by Karen Travis. It's basically just a hostage situation, and they have Omega Squad be involved with it. This was actually a pretty decent, short story. I was pretty into it for a good portion of it. And in the actual novel, Hard Contact, constantly throughout the novel, they reference, and then even outside of universe, they have little quotes from people in the beginning of chapters. There's a lot of Cal Scarata, this Mandalorian who trained the Omega Squad, or trained those particular clones, and cared about them genuinely. We actually get to meet that Mandalorian in this in this short story. I imagine he'll have a bigger role in the following novels when we get to more Republic Commando stuff. But from what we got here, he seems really interesting, and I want to know more about him. But yeah, I can pretty much recommend this one. It was a very, very, very good one. So, for a short story, anyway. Up next is Equipment, also by Matthew Stover. This was another Hasbro short, like the one by Timothy Zahn, The Duel, and Jude Watson. This is in the paperback of Shatterpoint. You don't have to go find this illegally online. You just have to own Shatterpoint. It'll be in the back end of the book. Equipment. This follows a clone that's going to appear in the novel at some point. And he's chilling, he's cool, he's doing stuff. And it's an okay little story. It's nothing phenomenal. Though if you hate first person, like Matt Wilkins, you're going to hate the short story. And then finally, of course, we get to the Shatterpoint novel by Matthew Stover. Matthew Stover is by far top 5 EU writers of all time for me. He wrote the excellent, the spectacular, 13th book in the New Jedi Order series, Traitor, which focuses on the 1-year imprisonment and torture of Jason Solo and his philosophy lessons with Verge. That was an amazing book. I finished that book in a single day, which I usually don't do. This was during lockdowns with COVID and everything. I couldn't leave my house anyway. And I think I got up, did my workout and everything. It was 9 to 10, a.m. And I just sat there and I read and read and read. No pee breaks, no water breaks, no food breaks. I just read it all the way through in one sitting because that's how much I enjoyed the novel. Episode 3 novelization. The novelization to Revenge of the Sith is also written by Matthew Stover. Some argue that it's even better than the movie, which I can understand those arguments. I don't agree, but it is a phenomenal read. It is a phenomenal, absolutely spectacular read, and that is that. Also by Matthew Stover. So you get to Shatterpoint, and you're like, so this has got to be God tier, right? The reviews I've seen of Shatterpoint, you have either people who give it absolute praise, or they don't like it. Matt Wilkins being a prime example, someone who doesn't like it. Though, it seems more of his gripes come from the first person sort of way of going about the story that they do occasionally throughout the novel. than the actual story itself. So I don't have an issue with first person. I grew up with stuff like Percy Jackson, which is entirely first person. It's basically, for those who don't know, like Harry Potter, but with Greek gods. Like all the students are half god of the Greek gods. But that was entirely in first person. Of course, then they made a spin-off series, which was in third person, which is a bit weird. But anyway, point being, I don't mind it. And it's not the entire book. Half the book is a traditional, as you would expect it to be in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, third person. There's these like private journal entries, which are in first person with Mace Windu, kind of give us more to his headspace. This book also seems to be heavily inspired by um, Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now. For those of you familiar with those movies, you kind of know the tone of the book. And the first half does a really good job of this. You have um, Mace Windu getting this message from his former Padawan, Depa Balaba, whatever, Depa. Depa is that one lady with the things in the middle of her forehead. If you enjoy canon, which of course I don't, but if you've watched season 7, or sorry, not season 7, if you've watched Bad Batch, you know that she is the master to Kanan. Kanan being the guy who's the master to Ezra in Rebels. All of which shows I don't care about, but that's who she is. And in canon, she, died during Order 66. I don't know what happens to Depa in Legends, but she seemingly turned to the dark side. And won't leave this jungle planet. This jungle planet also being a planet that Mace Windu originates from. And so he goes on a mission to bring her back to the light, or bring her to justice. Of course, during all this, he has to deal with these horrible things going on, like children being murdered, and having real philosophical debates in his head. And I think that first half of that was very strong. You move into the middle after the third act, and it gets a little... I don't know if this was intentional. My main issue with this book being that the reason it seems like the Mace Windu learns nothing, ultimately, by the end of the book, is because he can't. Episode 3 denies him that. He can't really evolve as a character. He's stuck in his ways. Which is just really frustrating to read about. There's also just that he's a hypocrite, which is not a big deal. I'm a Christian, for those who don't know. And whenever somebody says, hey, I don't want to go to church, it's just full of hypocrites, I'm like, come on down, pal. We got room for one more. Because we're all hypocrites. Of course, I also stole that quote from Frank Turek, who you should definitely check out. But, Mace Windu goes probably killing like 1,000 people in this book. And Depa kills a couple with a lightsaber. And he's like, it's just like, I don't know. And then there's just parts of this book that were just dragging on and on. And I kept checking the clock. Like, you shouldn't be doing that when you're entertained by something, right? You should just, like, be into it. So I guess, non-spoiler wise, ultimately, I enjoyed the book. I don't hate it. I don't think it's a bad book. I also don't think it's one of the best ones. I think there's a lot of issues with it, but I think there's also a lot of brilliant moments in it. It's kind of a mixed bag for me. But of course, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If I think something sucks, I'll tell you. If I think something's awesome, I'll tell you. I'll never lie, so I will tell the truth, and I'm just kind of, it's good, but not phenomenal. And certainly not one of Matthew Stover's best. Anyway, I'm really tired. I need to finish this up. Oh, man. Sorry. For those of you who don't want spoilers, or don't care about spoilers, for those of you who don't want spoilers, this is your time to check out. If you care about... Oh, frick. Actually, never mind. Hold on. I should also mention that as of, I think, this year, there was a re-released, like part of this Essential Legends collection where it got a new cover art, an unabridged audiobook of Shatterpoint. So if there's any time to read this book, it's probably now, especially if you like the character. This is the most in-depth we get of him, and for that I really appreciate it. But yeah, there's a new cover for it that you can buy in store shelves. Recently, this just came out. Not like just came out, but in this year. And then also an unabridged audiobook, which never existed before. I don't have access to that, but that's a thing if you want it, which, always helps with the experience, I think. Anyway, now I'm going to get into spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, now's your time to skedaddle, right? I know I was a bit vague with everything, but I don't know, I'm tired, and honestly, a lot of the book doesn't matter. It's a lot of walking, talking, which I like, but nothing happens, so wasn't too much to talk about. One thing interesting to learn was that Mace Windu joined the council, the Jedi Council, at age 13, which is, like, insane. Yoda and Mace's relationship, we get a little bit of that in here, and that was also just really interesting to see how their dynamic works together. And then Mace's former Padawan, of course, I mentioned already. There is a really cool Emissary of Malastare reference in here. So earlier on in the Star Wars comics, we had issues that went for a bit. It kind of turned into a Mace Windu story, but it started off as something else. But by the end of it, it's Depa and Mace on Nar Shaddaa. And they mention that here in this book, which is really, really cool. It's just a nice EU connection. Civilization isn't the same out here. So there's a lot of awful things you see in this book. Child murder, hangings, just really, as it's one of the darker books in the EU. I certainly didn't feel happy reading it. I felt mostly depressed for a good portion of it. It really shows, one positive I can truly give to this book is that it truly shows the horrors of war. Definitely different from the rest of the galaxy. Much, much later on, Mace initiates this character named Nick into the Grand Army, so he becomes a part of the Republic, which is really cool. I believe he shows up in other books, so that'll be interesting. And lastly, the Vong. So Mace Windu has a dream during one of the private journals where he mentions Coruscant covered in jungle, with impossible ships flying by. Now, this has to be a Vong reference. I mean, Traitor was written before this. It has to be. But I don't think it's only a Vong reference. I don't think that's the primary point. I think it's a cool Easter egg for people who care about the expanded universe and continuity and like the New Jedi Order. But I think it's also a double meaning because Mace is on this planet for the whole book, but the galaxy as Mace Windu's always understood it, democracy, the Republic, it's dying. And Palpatine taking over, it kind of is this metaphorical jungle taking hold, right? And it'll become something unrecognizable to Mace Windu. This jungle is wrapping itself around Coruscant with all the corruption and the deceit and everything. And the chaos and misery that will come out of that is the jungle that Mace fears. Of course, he doesn't know who Palpatine really is. I'm just saying that he can sense something's wrong with everything. And so that was a very interesting thing. The dichotomy that they used a lot in the book between the jungle and civilization. So uncivilized. But, and lastly, to win a war, Jedi must stop acting like Jedi. That was a discussion between Mace and Depa that I found very interesting. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm really tired, so I'm not gonna keep going. But yeah, I mean, nothing else really happens besides that. I mean, the way it wraps up is really quick and actiony, and it's just okay. Wasn't really my thing. I didn't even mention the bad guy of this book, Carvaster. He's cool. He's he's a little interesting, but ultimately, I didn't think he was much of a threat. I didn't find him super interesting. Maybe this is the issue with me, because like tribes in general, I just don't care for. Um, like quality autism, Noah, my boy, he likes the Lost Tribe of the Sith, and I'm like, how? It's so utterly boring. Um, and I've never cared about tribes on different planets. I just don't care about it. So maybe that's a me thing. I just didn't really feel his. I mean, he's not really a villain by any means. He's more an antagonist. I didn't really feel it with this character. I mean, he definitely has some interesting moments, interesting discussions, but ultimately, I don't care about the guy like at all. Whether rooting for him to be a bad guy and do evil things or whatnot, I just don't care. Like Thrawn, he looks in art piece. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, chew it up, give me more. But I just don't care about this guy. And if he shows up again later, cool. But I could care less. So it's kind of a mixed bag for me. This book. I mean, I enjoyed it overall. I'm glad I read it. It just also felt like a chore at times. So take that with what you will. Enjoy this video with a thumbs up. Sharing episode 10. Don't forget to subscribe. Love you guys, and may the force be with you.